Hello, welcome to Pictures and Popcorn. I am Matt.
And I'm Lenny. Today we're going to be talking about The Five Bloods. It's a brand new film that's out on Netflix, so you can probably watch it. Spoiler warning, we talk about absolutely everything that happens in this film, so if you have not seen it, go and watch it now. So we're talking about The Five Bloods, which is Spike Lee's new film about some Vietnam veterans who buried some gold, and the war is over. It's now current day, and they're going back to find some gold. And not only is this a really good time to be releasing this film, it's got a lot of sort of social commentary in it about race and whatever, but obviously it's got kind of like a bit of a spin because it's mostly in Vietnam. This is a really good film. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I loved this film. It was entertaining, it was emotional, and it was informative. So I've seen two Spike Lee films, and those three things were my takeaways from both films. I've seen this and BlacKkKlansman. Both films were very funny at points. Both films did not pull any punches when they needed to. Covered horrendously difficult topics that still need addressing in modern day life. And they taught a lot of people about things they might not have known about. So, for example, we're in the UK. In the UK, the Vietnam War isn't something that's very much covered or talked about in just general life.
We literally only know about it because of films, because of war films. That's it.
Yeah.
Which, granted, this is, but this is not that at the same time.
Up until 2 years ago, I didn't even know America lost, right? That is how little of an understanding of the narrative I had of just being raised with like the British history curriculums, and I know a lot of that's under scrutiny at the minute anyway. But yeah, so for me, this film, I thoroughly enjoyed it. The characters, they were so good. There was so much depth to them. Each of them had their own traits and flaws.
Yeah, it was really nice that all of the characters, and obviously they were together in this troupe, so they didn't choose to be friends. They just went through this experience together, and presumably they hadn't met one another since then, so they had this kind of camaraderie, but they were very different people, and that in film is always a good thing to kind of throw people in with each other. It's like, okay, so you've got this easygoing, funny guy, whatever, and then you've got this guy with PTSD, which is like it's taken seriously within the film, and it's kind of the crux of this. Paul is supposed to be the antagonist, but he's also not. He's not a villain. He's just got PTSD and is struggling with it, and putting all these characters together creates a really nice dynamic. Like, they did the characters incredibly well to get the point of the film across.
Yeah, so like you brought up the topic of Paul, who is, I guess there's no main character, but he just get a lot of the limelight.
He's the star of the film. He is the focal point, I guess.
It was such a good performance. Like, it perfectly captured the whole thing of he's struggling with his own problems, but he's also trying to look out for himself because that's what he's had to do all this time. But at the same time, he's also got this bond with these other people that he's torn between. And seeing this one man just torn apart like by himself, it was done so well. And like you were saying, it adds such an interesting dynamic to the rest of the story and the rest of the group because they're all bouncing off each other. Like, for example, it's brought up at the start of the film. They're all sat in a bar back in Vietnam. They're reminiscing about everything that's gone off. And Paul drops the bombshell that, he's a Trump supporter. He wants to look after their own, which is quite an out there opinion for this group of characters, that this individual would be backing this wildly divisive political figure. And it's nice to see those cracks forming in even the smallest things. Like, you see the differences in these people just from there, and that spreads out throughout the whole film. Like, that's the sort of the shatter point that things start, and then they splinter more and more. Things get more tense. He's struggling with his PTSD, and there's a lot of depth to that character that I just love.
Mm-hmm. So Paul, I think the idea behind Paul and his, I guess, political views draw an interesting conversation of there's a lot of people that watch films and want their characters to just be like them, like the audience member. Like there's a lot of people that think when someone writes a character that is hideous for whatever reason, they sometimes will critique the filmmaker as if that's a projection of themselves, which is not always the case. And I think this is a really perfect example of that, is that you've got these characters that are kind of obviously share these sort of we'll say mildly left-wing views, whatever.
Yeah.
Paul is the opposite of that. Paul, right-wing guy, he supports Trump, but he's not seen as the enemy because of that. Like they give him a bit of stick for it because that's what they would do, but he's not necessarily seen as an awful guy because of it, half because the film sort of justifies why he feels like that. And I think that's a really good thing. I do, however, while we're on the topic of that little scene in the bar, there's a few uses in the film, and Spike Lee does this a little bit, where they actually use real life footage. There's some footage at the beginning of the film that we can get to, but there's some footage here of the Trump rally where there is one black guy at the back that I think's holding a sign that says, "Oh, blacks for Trump," and there is literally just one guy, and they cover his face up and they point it, and it's like, "Oh yeah, this is actually Paul." Obviously it's not, but like that is a real person, and they are kind of just calling that guy out. I get the blurred his face, I get it, it's supposed to be a political commentary anyway, but they are just calling out this one real life guy.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is not that's not cool. It's fine, they blurred his face. If they hadn't have done that, I'd have had a much bigger issue with it. But I'm unsure that a fictional film is the right time to call out a real life person. I
mean, you say that about blurring his face. I imagine anyone could just say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to look into that clip and just find the unblurred version."
You absolutely could,
sort of starts the breadcrumb trail.
Yeah, but also the idea behind the film is that is Paul. They aren't.
Yeah. Oh no, I get you. I just meant on the real life version.
Yeah, the film isn't calling that real life person out, except everyone like watching it knows that is a real thing, and therefore knows that is a real life person. So the issue is still there.
Yeah.
Did they need to do it? No, not really. Does it have a really bold statement? Yes. So it does its job. I know what they were going for, and it worked. So with that, right at the beginning of the film, and I think there's bits kind of splurged throughout. Right at the beginning of the film, there's some uses of actual footage of people being killed and some really graphic stuff, which I think sets you up nicely for what the film is going to kind of is going to tackle some tough things. So we're going to show you some really tough things to watch, and if you can't hack it, chances are you won't be able to hack the rest of the film. I think that is a much better way of doing it than singling out the one guy. I think it will turn some people off, but I think that's the point.
So he's obviously got a message that he wants to get across. He's got a statement that he wants to say. That's what this film is about. He's wanting to get these points across and tell people about this. So the fact he doesn't hold back with that, I have admiration for him for. He doesn't shy away that like, this isn't great. This might annoy some people. This might turn people off. He's like, fuck that.
They made bold choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the film definitely benefits from that, because it could have been, we're going to go for like sort of a light film drama where we aren't going to fully talk about the extent of the seriousness of what's going on. Something like Jojo Rabbit, where I wanted that last little section to be a lot darker, because it was. This does the exact opposite, and it's like, no, this was serious. This is what happened. Look at it. And it's not fictional. It's not flowery. This is real life footage of real humans being shot, being whatever, and it's like, okay, no, this is bad, and they want to show it you. This is the situation that these people are coming from, which then adds to Paul's character of PTSD, because he saw that, he was there doing some of that stuff. It's more understandable. You get Paul's character, you get the trauma that he's gone through, because we've seen some of it, just a little snippet, and you know that it was so much worse being there.
I think I'm glad that Paul's PTSD wasn't just something there for the sake of it. It had relevance within the story.
It gave him justification for being the villain without just having a forced character that was, because if this story was the generic version of this story, it'd be 5 people that were in the war. They planted the gold that they'd found. They came back to it. There was one of them that was obviously a little bit dodgy. He double crosses them, tries to steal the money. He then becomes the main villain, and then it's like a standoff, a sort of, I guess, like heist film where the good guys have got to get it back from the bad guy that crossed them. And this isn't that. This is so much more complex, and there isn't a strict hero and villain because there shouldn't be. He needs to be a character that we understand, and he is.
I'm going to use this moment to segue into the topic of that story that you just mentioned. So for me, where the film does lose some marks is kind of how sort of generic the general setup is. The whole soldiers finding treasure, burying it, coming back to it decades later. Like, there's even the Simpsons episode with that exact same setup that came out in 1996. And I feel like, obviously, this film took it further. That wasn't everything. Like you were saying, they built off of it with Paul's PTSD.
I think they used it as a launch pad, but...
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. But I don't know, it still niggled me a bit how at its very core it was somewhat generic, the whole setup. Like you sort
no,
of
that's fair. That's
an inkling of how
it
things
is
might
not
go.
a complex story. It is just it's something basic so that they can get on with what they actually want to talk about, which is fine. But that doesn't mean that they deserve praise for using that story because it is basic, very basic.
And that's one of the few flaws I have with this film. Like you with The Iron Giant, it was a film you enjoyed, but the story is one that's been told before.
Yeah, I wasn't gripped because I knew the beats it was going to hit.
Yeah. Like, I kind of had that with this a bit, but the fact that it launched away from it pulled away and the characters were telling the story, not the events. It was about the characters, not this is happening, then this, and this. It was these people and their struggle. So that pulled me back because it did lose me a bit when it was like, oh, okay, it's just this. It's this sort of quite similar plot.
So while we're talking about storytelling, there is one specific bit of storytelling that they did perfectly.
Yep.
So the best way that I can kind of intro this to anyone who's not aware of like I'm going to call it the rule of thirds, but there's a visual rule of thirds, and that's not what I'm talking about. It's about patterns and how human psychology works. So I'm going to talk about Game of Thrones for a few seconds. In the Battle of the Bastards, there's a moment where Ramsay Bolton, who's the bad guy in this battle, has the brother of the good guy, Jon Snow. And he is going to send the little brother, across the battlefield, essentially across no man's land. The battle hasn't started yet. He's going to send the kid across to his brother to safety. And as he starts running, the bad guy gets a bow and arrow and he starts firing it. And the first arrow misses. And then the second arrow misses. And then the third arrow misses. And that it's something that's used in storytelling, not a lot, but it is used to, we see that as a pattern. So we're constantly looking for patterns in everything visually, in things that happen, events, we're looking for patterns. And as soon as 3 of anything happens and it happens in the same way, we always expect that to just be the pattern. The pattern is not going to be broken anymore. Most things will stick to the thing of on the 3rd time it changes. So films will do this all the time where something happens again, and then the 3rd time it changes, because that is just the thing that we're looking for, because the pattern is broken early. If you keep the pattern going, you're expecting it to keep going. The 4th arrow hits the kid. And it kind of shocks you. They use different camera angles and everything to kind of make it seem like, oh, it's over. The 3rd arrow misses and it's over. He's safe, and then he just gets hit like with the 4th arrow, and it shocks you because you aren't used to it. You've got used to this pattern of him missing. This film does this even better and more subtly. So there's a scene in a bar, but not the scene that you're talking about. It's a little bit further on. It's the night before they're about to go out and try and find the gold. And the son of Paul, is talking to a French lady who She's part of like a bomb squad that goes around finding mines and deactivating them because there's still mines around from the war. So this conversation is just there, not only to set up this character because they're going to show up later, but they're there to show you that, oh, there's bombs that are still active. That's meant to stay in your mind. So that when they go out the next day and they're scanning for this gold, you're supposed to be thinking, what if it's a mine? And they do this perfectly every single time. They're like, oh my God, it's a thing, like I found a thing. And the idea is that you're going, what if it's a mine? The first time, dude goes to have a poo and he starts digging and he finds something and it's like, it could be a mine. It could be. It's not. It's a clue of, oh my God, the gold's here. Second time, not much time has passed, but they dig again a bit further down. It's like there's been a landslide and they actually find the gold that they've been looking for. But there is that tension of Leonite scan with the metal detector. Oh, okay, it is just the gold. So the third time, they've found all the gold. You know that the gold is no longer there to be found. The third time, it's like, okay, this has to be a mine. Like, they've shown it as, it's in the back of my mind, it's going to be a mine. And it's not. It's their fallen comrade, the fifth member of the five of them. It's his corpse, it's his skeleton, and they have the really nice moment. And I guess at that point they've established the pattern. The three things have happened. There is no mines, and then they leave it for a bit. You have forgotten about it, just so that for the next scene they can blow a guy's legs off with a mine because the pattern's been established. There is no mines. And then there's a mine and it blows the guy up. And it's perfect. Like, that is so well done of the establishment of, oh, is there going to be a mine? Nah, there isn't. Is there going to be a mine? Nah, there isn't. Is there going to be a mine? Nah, there isn't. Okay, fine. There's no mines. And then they blow a guy's legs off. And it's so well done.
One of the things that I loved in this film was how they had the deaths. There wasn't the emotional build-up. There wasn't the eyes welling. It was just bang. He's lost his legs. He's fucked.
Bang, he's now half a person. Yeah, so well done. And it has so much more impact.
Yeah, like, I love that in films. Like, I love it when there's, like, it adds that realism to it.
We'll talk about this as and when The Kingsman comes out, but there's a moment in the first Kingsman film where they physically, like, they're sort of fourth wall breaking and they're like, yeah, this is not one of those films, because they're talking about it being a traditional spy film and that it's not one of those, and then they shoot the main character in the face, and that works perfectly. It's the kind of, oh, Jesus Christ, he's dead moment that, again, something like Game of Thrones did really well because they don't follow the traditional beats, and this did not follow the traditional beats, and it has more impact because of it.
So, one more thing I want to talk about was the use of production techniques within this film.
Okay, hit me.
I fucking loved, like, the change of the resolution, the color depth, the film grain, when they were filming the flashback scenes. Mm-hmm. When it was showing the older scenes in Vietnam, showing the combat, how it just looked authentic and gritty, like it was taken out of a decades-old Vietnam film. Like, for me, that was, when I realized what they were doing, it just added so much to it. It was such a nice little polish there in the film. And I mean, Chadwick Boseman was just great anyway. I do like him in films. It didn't have to be done. There was no need for it to be there. But it improved the film for me. It was just that extra little immersive thing that made you feel the differences between the time periods a lot more.
It was cleverer than that. I don't know if you've noticed, but it was actually more clever than what you're giving it credit for. So,
go on.
So they film the bits at the beginning where they're just meeting up, and it's in widescreen, like super widescreen, cinematic, like 23:1, whatever. 2 point, yeah, whatever. The super widescreen that most films are shot in. Then you get bits of the Vietnam footage, which is in like 3x4, so it's almost square, like old films. Well, not old films, but old video cameras would film that. Then they go and search for the gold, and they go out into the place where the war happened, and it doesn't go back to widescreen. It goes to 16:9. It goes to the exact in between of the beginning of the film where they're out in normal civilization and the Vietnam War. It gives you the middle ground because they are both back in that situation and in the modern day, and it does both, and that's awesome.
That's such a clever thing.
Mm-hmm. That's the visual way of showing you that they are not in the city, but they're also like not in the war. They are in this in between, and very, very nicely done.
I probably would have picked up on that had I not had to split my viewing across like 3 different periods.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Okay, this is my one critique. It is quite a long film. I don't know if it needed to be 2.5 hours. I don't specifically think that there's anything in it that needed to be cut out. Maybe it's just a case of each scene could have lost a minute and it'd have been fine, and that'd have cut a lot of time off. Like if I recounted everything that happened in the film, it doesn't seem like justification for 2.5 hours.
No.
It's fine. I enjoyed it nonetheless,
I'll agree with
but
you.
it does feel long. And yeah, did it need to be? Probably not. Is it fine? Yeah, I guess. So, same as normal. What would you give it out of 10, Matt?
I'd give it an 8. I thoroughly enjoyed the film. It taught me a lot about the racial oppression of 60s America, like within the Vietnamese War. I came out of it feeling entertained and fulfilled as far as the film can go. Like, it was an enjoyable experience. The things that I already mentioned with the plot did like knock it back down a bit, and I was also not overly keen on like the coincidental finding of the gold when David was just gonna take a dump. Like, that was another thing that was like,
They skipped over the traditional beats that would happen in that story to tell the more interesting story. But at the same time, like, that is that kind of coincidental storytelling that pulls you right out of a film.
I mean, they could have just found the case with the metal detector and everything played on as normal.
Yeah.
Like as it did in the film. And so 8 out of 10 for me, would recommend.
Cool. Yeah, I'm at a 7. Just because I think this is really well done. I like the dynamic between the characters. I like visually, other than the fact that the format changes between the settings, it's not absolutely gorgeous. It could be. Vietnam is one hell of a good looking country. It doesn't fulfill, I guess, as much as it could have there, but yeah, where I knock it down is just the fact that it's not exactly the kind of film that I tend to love, and I don't, but I do think it's very, very good. I would recommend watching this film if you have not, just because of because of what it's saying, and no other film is saying what this film is saying.
Yeah.
Very well done. As we said, the narrative beats are different to what the generic story would be, but it is still following that kind of generic story. So, whatever. So, yeah, I can't give it more than a 7, but still very, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it. Thank you very much for listening. If you are listening on Spotify, a follow would be greatly appreciated, along with a subscribe on YouTube or whatever else there is on the other things that you can listen on.
Alternatively, you can check us out on Twitter or Letterboxd to see us chat more shit about movies or many other things. Thank you for listening.
Bye-bye.